Well, hi, how are you guys today? This is Ghost Tracks Podcast. I'm your host, Tina, and you are here for a listener stories episode. Welcome in. I hope you guys have been well over the last week. How's everybody's weather doing? I don't know why I'm so obsessed with the weather these days, but I kind of am. Mostly because I'm excited for springtime, and we are so close. It is March and it was 74 today, I think. I don't really know, but it was beautiful outside. I came home from work. Well, I guess my front windows were down. My sunroof was open. The music was blaring. The vibe was right. So I'm looking forward to more days like that in the coming months. Not a whole lot else going on in my life over here. Still prepping for this Disney trip I keep talking about. We are, I think, 12 days out from Disney, so I'm super excited. I need to start gathering my clothing, I guess, and the items that I'm going to need for that trip, which means I'm probably going to have to hunt down my shorts because it's supposed to be in the 80s while we're there, and your girl will drop dead of heat stroke if I am not in shorts during this trip. So I need to get those and my tank tops out, let my tattoos see the sun for once, but figure we'll just go ahead and get started since I don't have too much else to say. Well, I guess we can talk about this. And I don't know that I mentioned it truthfully on the podcast in previous episodes. Just shy of a month ago, my husband and I went and rescued a doggo that had been locked in a vehicle for 2 weeks. I'm not really sure how she survived that situation, we'll say. I believe she just had a bunch of food tossed in at the beginning of those 2 weeks and doors were locked and she was left. And this happened the end of January into the 15th of February. That's when we got her out, was the 15th of February. So, we broke into said car and got her out, with the owner of the car's permission, obviously. And he was not the one that locked her in the vehicle. Kind of a long drawn out story on that front, but she came home with us that night. And we started a feeding schedule with her. She was very emaciated, probably weighed about 30. I'm not even comfortable saying 30 pounds, truthfully. You could see all of her ribs, all of her vertebra. It was pretty rough. Obviously, I've definitely seen dogs that were worse off than her. But the will of this dog to live had to have been so strong. But her name is Zara, and she's been home with us, like I said, just shy of a month, and she had her vet appointment today. I focused all of our energy on getting her weight up and, seeing how she did with the other dogs, because I have 7 dogs now with Zara included. But we have 6 dogs of our own, and we have 5 cats. And yes, I own a zoo over here. That's what it feels like some days. But, just checking on temperament and integrating her into the home and making sure she was fed and watered as she should be. And she is just the sweetest baby. She's a pit mix. Super, super, super sweet girl. And just wants to love people. So she had her vet appointment today. And she weighs 50 pounds now. The girl is like solid muscle too. Most pits are, so. But she looks beautiful, they said. She has stopped losing all of her fur because she was blowing her coat something fierce when we brought her home, which is very normal in a stressful situation like she was in. But she looks really good, and I have started looking for a home for her. So we are in the process of meeting some families that have, reached out with interest for her. And we are hoping to have her a home hopefully by the end of this weekend, but I'm also not rushing it. If I'm not feeling like these folks vibe with us and her, I'm just going to keep on trucking down the line. We had quite a few people reach out with interest for her, but I am going to be very diligent given that she is right around a year old and just what she's had to go through so far in her life is atrocious. So that's something else that's been going on in my life, but I am so happy to do it. She's definitely not the first dog or cat or parrot or the, let's see, what else have we rescued? Ferrets, raccoons. I've had so many raccoons in my house that, temporarily before they could go to a wildlife rehabber, but possums, I've rescued possums. At my previous job, there were 2 different instances where a possum went to work with me because I couldn't, take off. It was a cleaning job, so I had to be there for the cleaning. But yeah, and then the possum went to the rehab center after I got off of work. But I mean, I'm a huge animal lover and I can never just overlook an animal in need like that. So we are very happy that she's doing really well. And again, I'm super hopeful that she will have her very own amazing forever family very soon. But I guess we can get on with the episode now. No emails this week. That's okay. I went to Reddit and I was looking for some cemetery stories, really. And what I found was a person who used to be a tour guide in a popular tourist town located in Tennessee. And this particular person, and I'll give you their name because, I mean, I went for multiple stories by multiple people, and instead I got a treasure trove of stories from just this one person. So, and that writer is Recapitulator, and that they are going to be these story writers for today. So I'm going to get into what stories they have. Again, this person they said, I used to be a tour guide in a popular tourist town in Tennessee. My job at the time was to take people on a 2-mile walk around the town, telling them the ghost stories of the people who had lived there. During the summer, tours started a little before sundown and would end well after dark. All in all, it would take us roughly 1 to 2 hours to get through a tour, depending on the walking speed of my group. Just to preface this, the vast majority of stories we told were not true. They were either largely exaggerated, entirely fabricated, or simply gruesome stories of local murders with a paranormal twist added at the end, with the ghost of the killer still lurking about. Oh no, I even wonder how many of these types of tour group situations are like this. It's pretty devastating, actually, if you think about it, because obviously I love ghosts and paranormal anything, which is why I'm here doing a podcast about it. And how just devastating would it be to find out that the things that I am researching and loving and, want to investigate are just made up? That would be so sad for me. But they said, I didn't write the script, don't blame me. In fact, I visited a local museum and sourced authentic ghost stories from a curator in order to add a few of my own to the tour, which were actually authentic. I mean, that is some above and beyond job behavior. Kudos to you. That said, there were a handful of times during my stint as a tour guide in which I had experiences that were not so easily explained. In this post, I'm going to detail 3 of the most interesting stories. And I'm going to preface this by saying there are more than 3 because they just kept telling stories in the comments. So I took multiple of the other stories they wrote as well. So story 1. One of the tools we got for our tours were EMF detectors, which I'm sure you're mostly all familiar with. They're intended to scan for electromagnetic frequencies and will detect the relative strength of a signal they pick up. Now, Just because one of these things goes off does not mean you're seeing a ghost. They also pick up power lines and will go off like crazy near a generator. But if you're in the middle of nowhere and you suddenly get a strong signal, it's worth looking into. Now, these detectors we used had about 5 lights on them, changing in hue from green to yellow to red. Red meant no signal, and green indicates a strong signal. The light never goes below red unless you turn the thing off. That's the baseline. At the end of our tour, we would come to an old graveyard, nobody buried there in at least 100 years. After I did my thing with the final story, people would wander around and look at the graves with flashlights and scare themselves shitless. I love it. But one night, as they were wandering, a man called me over to see one of the graves. I went over and had a look and saw what the problem was. Whenever he passed his EMF detector over this particular grave, all the lights would turn off. The entire machine would turn itself off when it was over his grave, and turn itself back on as soon as you moved it away. We tried a couple of other graves, but only this one had the effect. We were curious about the grave, so we tried to read the name of the person, but the headstone was too worn down for us to read it. The first name was Thomas, as it usually was back in the day, was faintly able to be read, but the surname was too hard to read. We had the whole group, 5 people, leaning over it and at this point trying to read it, when we all heard the same thing. As one of the group wondered out loud what the man's surname was, a loud voice from behind us shouted, "Whaley." And as you may have guessed, there was nobody behind us when we turned around, and we called the tour to a close shortly after that. I never missed with that specific grave again, except to place some flowers on it one time, as was my habit every once in a while since nobody visited that place anymore. You're like the sweetest human. Can I just say that? You respect your work, your former work. You respect the graves. You place flowers on graves because people don't visit there anymore. Likely because a lot of the families have moved away, or, if it's a way back in time cemetery, family members don't, they're not going to visit people they don't know, typically speaking. And then you went and got authentic stories from the time for the tour. You're just a gem. I kind of love you. Story 2. At the end of the tour, sometimes I would get tips if people had fun or got spooked. Older Boomer and Gen X men really enjoyed the charade of the covert handshake tip, where they palm you the money as they shake your hand. I always indulged the bit because, hey, I was getting a tip. One tour I ran had a family of 3, mother, father, and daughter, and an older man who I initially thought was grandpa, but later learned he had been lumped into their group because we didn't run solo tours. The old guy was pretty quiet throughout the tour, but would occasionally ask very pointed questions that stood out to me as odd. I don't remember most of his questions anymore, this was years ago, but one example is that I was telling the story of a girl who fell from a balcony. Her ghost haunts the river she plummeted into to this day, quote unquote. And he asked me if I thought she died right away when she hit the ground, or whether I thought she died slow and suffered. Just weird things like that. Well, at the end of the tour, the family took off into the graves to have a look about, see if ghosts would show up in their pictures, etc. Old man came to give me that typical handshake, and mentally I was thinking that all this weird behavior could be easily forgotten if he tipped well. The handshake was normal, except that his hand was ice cold. But old folks have cold hands, so I didn't think too much about it. Except he didn't palm me $1, he palmed me a coin. I thought it was a $50 when I felt it at first, but it was too big. I turned to glance at the guy as he walked past me to leave, and I shit you not, he was just gone. The path leaving the graveyard was downhill, and you had visibility from the top for at least 300 feet. There was no way he could have covered that distance in that time, and I didn't even hear running. Just this old, tottering man in front of me 1 second and gone in the blink of an eye when he walked past me. When I got home and looked up the coin, I learned it was a 1 troy ounce silver bullion, minted to an older year, and I don't remember exactly. I can check the year when I get home this evening if anyone cares. Overall, the experience left me a little shocked, and the family agreed he was really odd when I walked them back to their car. Apparently, the guy greeted their daughter by name when they arrived at the meetup spot a few minutes before me, but they had no idea who he was. I probably would have been like, this dude can't go on our tour because he just greeted my daughter by name and we do not know him. I am way too protective of my kids to be messing with something like that. Story 3. So 2 weird experiences, but no ghostly apparitions or demonic screams. Unfortunately, most nights on the ghost tour were entirely mundane. However, I have got one more odd story I experienced which really set my belief of ghosts in stone. Also, I love that they say, I have one more story, but I think I've gathered at least 2 more. So, there's not just one more. We're going to keep going. One of the earlier stops in our tour was an old cabin where the town's progenitor once lived. The cabin has been moved around a couple of times to build parking garages, but has since been placed back in its original spot. We don't actually have a photo of the woman who founded the town, but we have got pictures of her granddaughter, who everyone at the time swore was a dead ringer for her grandmother. Because of this, an old black and white photo of her granddaughter is on the sign outside the cabin. The cabin is kept locked up with a padlock at all times, except when the Historical Society opens it up for school groups. The windows are so dirty, you can't see inside, and most of the time, it's too dark to get a decent look inside anyway. Regardless, I like to encourage people to peek through the cracks in the old wood because they'd psych themselves into thinking they saw something move, and a spooky tour is a tour with good tips. Anyway, one night after I did the whole spiel about her founding the town and how people say they can see her ghost within the cabin, and some nights to this day, I let them all have a go at peeking inside. One of the younger teens in the group approached me after looking inside, and we had a very odd conversation. These kids, 13 to 16 years old, usually think it makes them cool to be skeptical and show everyone they're not scared. So he asked me something like, "Who's in the costume?" And I was a little confused and explained how the photo of the sign is a picture of the granddaughter of the town's founder, but that she wasn't wearing a costume. This was how people dressed at the time. The little shit rolled his eyes and told me he meant the woman in the cabin. Of course, I had to have a look, so I peeked through, and sure enough, a street light was shining through the dirty windows and letting in a diffused sort of light, and you could just make out a figure in a rocking chair sitting in the corner of the dark cabin, rocking back and forth. It was hard to get a good look of her, but from what I saw, she did look just like the woman in the photo. I moved the group on pretty fast because, quite frankly, I was a little afraid it was a homeless person who'd broken in somehow. And if it was, I had a group of 6 kids and 1 parent, homeschoolers, I think. I didn't want anybody getting hurt or snatched, but I stopped by the cabin again on the way to my car, and the lock was on tight and undamaged. I peeked inside again, and there wasn't even a rocking chair in the cabin. In the whole time I worked the tour route, roughly 2 years, I never saw a chair in that cabin again, or any old women for that matter. So anyway, these are my stories. I know they aren't as sensational as some, but I thought I'd share my experiences with you all. I have a few more odd stories that I can share if you'd like, but they're all more explainable by mundane means, if not still creepy and odd. So I actually have a story of a woman in a rocking chair myself. When I came to the States, because again, I was born overseas in England, and we came to the States probably in 91. No, I would have been older than that. Yeah, 91, I think, is when we came over. Maybe 1990, but 90 or 91, I think it's when we came to the States. And then we lived in Washington State for a little while my dad finished up his military career. And then we moved from Washington State. And of all places, we landed ourselves in Delaware. And the home that we lived in Delaware is actually one of the homes on the National Historic Register. And it was a home that had been used in the Underground Railroad. Cool freaking house. But that's not the house that I saw the ghost in, okay? In 1994, on the East Coast, there was a huge ice storm. And anybody in my age range or older should remember the 94 ice storm. It was intense. And our home had lost power. And I believe we had fireplaces, but I do not believe that they were able to be used. Or maybe my parents just felt more comfortable being in a home with other people. I'm not really sure. But we went to a friend's house, my parents' friend's house, also in the town that we were living in. And they also had a very, very, very old home. And I can remember the home pretty well. And they might have had power. I don't think they had power. But I do remember having the fireplaces going. Neither here nor there. Anyway. But I remember walking into, I'm going to assume it was probably the living room, and there was a fireplace going, and I don't remember if the rocking chair was supposed to be there or not, but there was a woman in period clothing in the rocking chair in front of the fireplace, and she was rocking. She did not look at me. I don't believe she looked at me, but I remember stopping like, holy crap, what is this? This is not one of the family members. And then she was just gone. And I think I was probably 6. Let's see, 90. No, I would have been 7. 6 or 7. Because I don't remember if it was like early year for the ice storm or if it was like later in the winter, of 94. Because I'm a June baby. So I'm born right there in the middle of the year. But anyway, yeah. I've definitely had a ghost in a rocking chair experience, so I feel you there. Story 4. All right. I've already told most of my good ones, but hopefully this one is still interesting. On the night that this happened, I had 2 tours in a row. This gets more common the closer you get to October because we start having more tours booked than we can facilitate. So the first one would run from about 8 to 9 or 9:30, and the second one would end sometime around 10:30 or so usually. I always offered to walk my tours back to their cars afterwards. The city's pretty safe, but it's confusing in the dark. However, it does have a nightlife, and sometimes they would decline because they wanted to hit a bar afterwards or keep exploring the cemetery. Is this Nashville, Tennessee by chance? They said that it was in Tennessee. And Nashville's nightlife is crazy. I'd let them do as they pleased, so if they weren't interested in going back with me, I'd make the walk back alone. This was one of those times, and it was for a later tour which had run over, so it was probably around 10:45 when I started walking back to my car. It's a lonely walk through some pretty looking but odd areas of town to get from the cemetery to the parking garage that I knew wouldn't check your ticket. I bought 1 ticket and just used it over and over again. Cheating the system. Stick it to the man. So I was on my way back for what would normally be a 15 to 20 minute walk, and everything seemed totally normal to me until I got in the car. When I got in and started it up, I glanced at the clock and it was 12:01. I double-checked my phone and 12:01 was on the clock. I have no idea how I turned a 15 to 20 minute walk into an over an hour walk. Were you abducted? Did you get probed by aliens in that hour? Where did your hour go? I don't think there's anything more scary to me than lost time. Like, could you imagine, feeling comfortable and having your day going how you thought it was supposed to be going and just carrying on with your business. And then all of a sudden, it's hours later and you don't remember any of it. That would be horrifying. I thought maybe I left the tour later than I had thought, but I always texted my boss when the tours were over so she knew to mark me as clocked out. Checked the text, 10:47. I wish I could say there's more to it than that, but that's the whole story. Somehow, without stopping at any point in my walk and going at what seemed to me to be a standard pace, I arrived at my car an hour later than I should have. I have made that walk hundreds of times, and every other time it's taken me 15 to 20 minutes. I just don't get it. Or maybe you crossed timelines. Did you get into like a liminal space somewhere in a back alley? And then you just kind of wandered for a little while and then you found your way back out? That'd be crazy. I need to know more. Where is this in Tennessee? I'm going to go hunt down this questionable area. Maybe I'll lose an hour. Story 5. All right, here's another. It isn't as obviously paranormal as the others listed here, but it was really weird. I had a group of 5 women with me that night, and to be honest, they were all drunk. It was some kind of bachelorette party, I think. This is pretty standard. There are a lot of wineries up there, and it's pretty common that folks get wasted well before the tour starts. As usual with a group like this, I was careful to keep an eye on everyone. We walked by a river at one point in the tour and go past a couple other places that could make for a pretty nasty fall. And the last thing I want is a drunk tourist getting lost on my watch. So I took mental note of the start of the tour, how many folks I had in the group, and after every stop, I took a quick head count to make sure that all 5 women were still with us. They all seemed to have a great time, as folks often do when they're drunk and hearing ghost stories. They kept asking me questions about scary things I'd seen and were a very engaging group. The tour came to a close, and they were generous tippers to boot. I was in high spirits, and I wanted to make sure that they all made it back to their hotel okay, so I offered to walk them back. They accepted, so I took a brief detour on my walk home to take them back to their hotel. As they were going in, I did one last head count and got 4 women. I was pretty alarmed and asked them all if they had seen where their friend got off to. All 4 women swore their group was only 4 and that there wasn't a 5th woman. I could swear on anything there that there were 5 girls. All 5 were chattering, joking, engaging with one another. No loners that maybe just wandered into our tour. I counted 5 heads at least a dozen times over the course of the tour. I double-checked their ticket, and sure enough, there were only 4 of them on the registry. But I know there were 5 of them. I passed out 5 EMF detectors. I know I did. It still confuses me to this day. It could have just been my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe they lied to save money on tickets, but it was just odd. Somebody had commented on, and I didn't keep the comment, they had asked if there was a missing EMF detector, and the writer said, I neglected to mention that, my mistake. I was 1 detector short for several weeks, and my boss was not happy about that. I ended up buying one myself to replace it and claiming that I had just briefly lost it in my car. So you handed out an EMF detector to a ghost to ghost hunt with. I actually find that quite entertaining. But yeah, so those are all the stories by Recapitulator. I do want to know where this sat in Tennessee. You know, I'm not too terribly far away from Tennessee, and I love going on ghost tours. Apparently even the fake ones. But I know they don't work there anymore, but it seems very interesting. I'm glad. It sounds like this person really did love their job and took it very seriously. And like I said, took those extra steps to kind of go above and beyond, getting their own research in, getting their own ghost, encounters in through the history of the town. And then, putting flowers on graves and all. Like, just 5 stars, person, whoever you are. I adore you, and I think I would have loved to had a ghost tour done by you. So I'm glad that I found those stories. I think that they were great. I'm a little shocked that they were all by one person, but I guess it made it easier in the end for me doing the research. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it all. Um, I'm sorry, I'm a little sniffly all of a sudden. The springtime is coming and I'm excited about it, but so are the allergies. So I'm doing my best. But yeah, thank you for joining me again for another episode. I have social media, so you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. The podcast is put out on pretty much every podcast platform. We have Spotify, we have Apple, we have iHeartRadio, we have YouTube. I think there's one more and I can never remember, but I'm just going to assume if you're listening to me right now, you're on your preferred streaming platform. But hey, maybe your best friend who might like to listen along doesn't like the same platform as you. And if that's the truth, are they even your best friend? But you can like and share, follow along, leave a comment. I guess I wouldn't love getting a nasty comment, but I do love getting comments and engaging with people. If you're on my social medias or would like to join, it's Ghost Tracks Podcast on all the platforms. But again, the biggest thing is sharing and leaving a review on whatever platform. That's super helpful as well for podcasts in general. Just helps us get seen and, filtered out to other people to gain some new listeners. So it's just helpful. If you have a story that you'd like to share and have read on the podcast, you could do that. I would love to hear from you. The email is ghosttrackspodcast@gmail.com. You can just put listener story in the subject line and I'll give it a read. If you want to stay anonymous, please just tell me that in the email and I will adjust it before reading it or, change your name. Maybe you want to be Superman the day that you write in the email to me, and I'm all for it. Okay? I'll read whatever's there. But yeah, I love hearing from you guys. I'm super excited to be doing this still. Any suggestions that you guys have for stories, ghost stories, or anything that you've heard, or your own, like I said, give me the deets. I want to hear about it. I am always open to be given suggestions for, things to research. I do have a list, but I want to keep that list growing so that I can keep doing this. And eventually my little brain, my bowl of oatmeal brain, is going to run out of ideas because I'm just one person. But so yeah, that's where you guys come in to help me out. But yeah, like, share, follow, comment, review, stars, I don't know, any of the above. But I'm grateful to be here and I'm super thankful for you guys to be here too. I think that's it. Well, I will see you next time, but thank you so much for being here and stay creepy. Bye.